The bottom 20% of the US population are living with less than $10,000 a year, compared to the top 5% who are living with around $132,000. This was information posted by the US Census Bureau, and this exemplifies the exponential wealth inequality in the United States of America. Today, my group will be talking about wealth inequality. Good morning, my name is Sid Shaw.
Good morning, my name is Valentina Barbosa.
My name is Felipe.
My name is Daniel Correa.
My name is Maria Rocha. Our group question is, to what extent does wealth inequality impact U.S. citizens in terms of educational opportunities, labor dynamics, and income distribution? Wealth inequality is currently a large problem in the U.S. and it affects its citizens by limiting educational opportunities, healthcare quality, income disparity among races, gap in home ownership, decreasing equal social interactions, taxation and policies, and gender pay gap.
Wealth inequality has increased greatly over the years as the rich keep getting richer and the poverty rates keep increasing. According to Hub Merjokian of the Tax Association, he states that in 1980, the top 1% held about 25% of all wealth in the United States. Today, that has increased to about 40%. And as we can see on the graph over here, the top 1% along with the top 9% has more than 50% of all the wealth in the United States. Similarly, during the same time as wealth inequality was increasing, government spending has also increased, showing a correlation. According to Randall G. Hongfong of the Independent Review, he states, policymakers consider their own interests when making decisions, leading to them to act less entrepreneurial, which creates more obstacles to creating wealth. And as we can see over here, the graph shows the total government spending, which greatly resembles the wealth inequality graph.
Economic and political systems. The U.S. government has placed laws that help enforce the capitalist system that we live in today. Capitalism is a very independent system that allows individuals to place their own prices on their own products. This is unlike other systems that promote collective ownership such as socialism. Capitalism has various benefits on social and economic mobility through entrepreneurship. As we can see, this is the different types of social classes which the creation and success of businesses allows individuals to move throughout.
Social mobility is the movement of individuals through an economic class in the social strata. This could be identified as upper class, middle class, and lower class. Depending on what class you're in, you get better opportunities. Martin Hausen states generational wealth is what allows the purchase of various goods and services, including those that support learning and educational success. This shows intergenerational wealth inequality. Not only does this show that if you have money coming from family members that were already rich, you get better future opportunities along with a better chance of staying in the class that you're in. As if you were in the lower class, you stay in the lower class and it would be a lot harder to move up.
When looking at wealth inequality, it's important to know that women usually find themselves earning less than their male peers for comparable work. This wage gap negatively impacts women's and is usually influenced by the occupational segregation and implicit gender bias, since women have always been considered inferior. As you can see in this graph right here that talks about the gender pay gap among doctors from 2006 to 2016, we can see that women who are in pink usually have a big difference between the rates of income when it comes to work throughout among all of the years. It has never increased. Another group that is also very affected by wealth inequality is people of race. This is because they're in the top of the list of poverty. These people usually have a harder time finding job opportunities because of the access of education. Also, these people usually don't have a place to live, which makes the situation even harder. In this graph right here that talks about child poverty, the decline of child poverty, we can see that the comparison of white people to the people of race, with the exception of Asian Americans, and we can see that the white people, they stay in the 10th percentile, while the mean of these three races is 30.4, and the difference is just like humongous, it's 20%.
Touch it.
Oh, touch
There you go.
Okay.
Home ownership rates across different diversity and ethnic groups is still a problem in the USA. According to established author Chuck Collins, he states in 2016, 72% of white families owned their homes compared to just 44% of black families. Between the times of 1983 and 2016, Latino home ownership increased by a dramatic 40%, but it still remains far below the rates for whites at just 45%. As shown in this graph here, we can look at the vertical column, which looks at the rates of home ownership in percentages, and we can look at the horizontal row, which talks about the timescale from 1904 all the way to 2014. These individual lines represent ethnicity, with the black line being the whites, this purple line being Hispanics, the blue line being blacks, and the green line being Asians. This represents this still apparent gap in wealth and home ownership rates.
Taxes and policies. As you can see, top 37% make more than $500K a year, while the bottom 10% had to live with less than $22,000 a year. Professor Kay and Daphne and Andrew Rachofsky claim that Michigan distributes state revenue relatively evenly across school districts, although districts in the wealthiest quintile receive about $600 more in state revenue per pupil than other districts. Essentially, people with higher income get taxed higher amounts. Therefore, wealthier areas have more money in order to fund social services. Which brings us to our next point, education.
Wealth inequality negatively affects education as lower income students end up with less resources than upper income students, leading to worse academic performance. According to Gibson Davis from the Journal of the Social Sciences, he says, parents' resources heavily influence children's outcomes, and children with less resources end up worse. As we can see on the graph over here, it shows that kids with a higher socioeconomic class have higher averages in grades and tests than kids with a lower or middle socioeconomic class.
Healthcare. In the US, the quality of healthcare is directly related to the cost of it. Therefore, lower income families are less likely to receive better quality healthcare, medicine, and treatments. As you can see, the higher percentage of poverty do not meet the aerobic or strength goals that they were tested in this activity. The nutrition one has also affects one's health. In the article by Carolyn Heinrich, an economic professor at Vanderbilt University, previous research overwhelmingly documents that children benefit from breastfeeding. The benefits are respiratory health and decreased chances of obesity and diabetes. However, lower income moms are less likely to have the proper maternity leave due to the fact most of them work 2 jobs. This can impact children's health in the long term.
At the end, our solution will be reduced government spending, this diversification of government spending and financial regulation and corporate social responsibility. While our limitations, on the other hand, would be less tax money goes into the supporting of all programs, less money poured into discriminatory outlays such as defense, and an enforcement of laws that many business owners and companies will dislike. Thank you.
Not up, just together. There's too many of you. Right, yeah, right. We'll start down here and work our way across, Maria. Maria, can you tell me how you decided to include Valentina's paper in your presentation?
We decided to include Valentina's paper because she talks about healthcare, and she also talks about education, which is a big aspect when talking about wealth inequality, especially because education impacts a lot with your income. Based on my paper, when I talked about race, I also mentioned how education, which is Valentina's paper, can impact with these people, because usually if, depending on where you're from and who you are, that makes you have like more or less opportunities, and also education goes inside those opportunities. So we saw in the presentation, white people have way more opportunities than people of color, people that are that came from different countries, especially in the United States. So I feel like education, which Valentina talked about, is a very important topic, and healthcare, which is also very important, because that's what everybody needs, and people not having access to healthcare, that's completely unacceptable.
All right. Valentina, reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your understanding of the problem you guys identified?
I think the one that had the greatest impact was Daniel's, due to the fact he talks about income and the difference in how that can really affect how much wealth families have. So he speaks on the different types of how like gender affects income and
Okay. Daniel, what's an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' reports you decided not to use, and then why?
We decided not to use my colleague Felipe's work because I don't believe that his historical aspect really fitted into our presentation's argument. And although we did talk about history, the historical points that he presented didn't really fit into our argument, and that's why we denied this argument.
All right. Felipe, what's a way in which your team's resolution makes you think differently about the research you conducted?
Well, I had some research on historical and how government spending also increases wealth inequality, and after the solution showed me that it isn't really about government spending that causes wealth inequality, and more how they spend it. So that kind of changed my idea on it.
Okay. And save the best for last. If you had had a sixth member of this team, what perspective could they have brought that would have added to what you were talking about?
A perspective that a sixth team member would have brought was the perspective of immigrants, and how, them coming from other countries would add to, their differences and how they accumulated wealth throughout the years.